Today we dive into a powerful story about injustice, resilience, and the courage it takes to stand up and change an entire system. Meet Ruby Harper, an African-American janitor at the prestigious Granton Enterprises. Armed with nothing more than a mop and bucket, Ruby is invisible in the eyes of the high-ranking executives around her, but hidden behind her humble appearance lies a plan to topple an empire. Surrounded by condescending stares and prejudiced remarks, Ruby quietly uncovers shocking secrets about the corporation. But can a lone janitor take on those who hold wealth and power in their hands? And what transformed Ruby from the lowest rung of the corporate ladder into the catalyst for unimaginable change? Follow along as we unravel this story of the fight between justice and injustice, where one person's courage can reshape an entire corporation. If you're inspired by stories of resilience and the power of truth, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us in sharing these compelling tales. What would you do if you were in Ruby's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below and get ready to experience a story you won't forget. Chuang 1. Ruby Harper stepped into the grand lobby of Granton Enterprises, gripping a mop and a worn bucket tightly in her hands. The faint scent of cleaning solution mixed with the cold, artificial air of the building's air conditioning made her feel like she was stepping into an entirely different world, a place where she knew she would never truly be welcome. Beneath her pale blue uniform and the small badge reading janitorial staff, Ruby concealed her true self, not just an ordinary janitor, but the majority shareholder of the very company she was cleaning. Ruby bent down to scrub a stain on the marble floor, trying her best to ignore the cold stares and soft, mocking chuckles echoing nearby. A group of office workers in sharp suits stood by the coffee machine, chatting loudly. "Look, is she new?" a blonde woman with bright red lipstick asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm as her eyes flicked toward Ruby. "Probably," replied a man with a black and white striped tie, smirking. "But you know how it goes with them. They never last long. We've got so many of them cleaning this place, I can't even remember their faces. Every day feels like the first day." Ruby felt her ears burn with indignation, but she kept her composure. She scrubbed the floor faster, deliberately ignoring their cruel remarks. As Ruby pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator area, a middle-aged man in a gray suit stood waiting, phone clutched in his hand. He glanced at Ruby from head to toe, his expression twisting into a look of disgust, as if he smelled something unpleasant. "Can you wait?" he asked coldly. "I need this elevator." Ruby paused, her calm expression unwavering. "This elevator is for all employees, sir," she replied softly, maneuvering her cleaning cart aside to make room. The man smirked. "Of course. But you understand, we need to get to the boardroom quickly. Important work, not like yours." Ruby didn't respond. She stood still, watching the elevator doors close. Inside, she told herself, let them underestimate me. Don't waste your energy. One day they'll have to look up to see me standing above them. During her lunch break, Ruby stepped into the janitorial break room. The small space, furnished with a scratched plastic table and a few metal chairs, was the only place where she didn't feel scrutinized by judgmental eyes. "Hey there, Ruby." Linda, an older woman with silver hair, greeted her. "How's your morning been?" Ruby gave a slight nod, sitting down and opening her packed lunch. "It's fine," she replied, though her voice carried a hint of weariness. Linda placed a comforting hand on Ruby's shoulder and sighed. "They're always like that. Those office folks think they're the center of the universe, and we're just shadows in their lives." Ruby didn't respond, but Linda's words struck a chord deep within her. All morning, she had endured the unseeing stares, greetings that were never returned, and conversations brimming with prejudice. That afternoon, Ruby was assigned to clean the top floor where the boardroom and executive offices were located. It was a place she always tried to avoid but couldn't help feeling curious about. She pushed her cleaning cart down the gleaming hallway, listening to the sounds drifting out of the boardroom. "We're absolute geniuses," a man's voice exclaimed, followed by loud laughter. "Absolutely, Nathan. Not everyone can achieve what we have. People like that cleaning girl out there, they just know how to bow their heads and work. They wouldn't understand what success looks like." Another voice replied, accompanied by a burst of mocking laughter that echoed like a sharp slap in the air. Ruby slowed down, her grip tightening around the mop handle. She knew they were talking about her. Their words weren't just an insult, they were vivid proof of how little they valued anyone outside their privileged circle. That evening, as Ruby returned to her workspace, she saw Malik, a young staff member, hunched over his computer. Malik was one of the few people who treated her with kindness. "Ruby, you look a little worn out today," Malik said, concern evident in his eyes. Ruby gave a faint smile and sat down across from him. "I'm fine, just frustrated by how people look at me." Malik nodded, his gaze reflecting understanding. "I get it. I've been here 3 years and they still call me the eye guy. Don't let them get to you. You're stronger than they think." Ruby smiled softly, feeling a flicker of gratitude. She knew she wasn't alone, but she also understood that the path she'd chosen wouldn't be an easy one. As her workday came to an end, Ruby stepped out of the main entrance of Granton Enterprises, looking up at the brightly lit building. She recalled her mother's words, "You have to be strong, Ruby. Don't let anyone define your destiny for you." Ruby took a deep breath, her hands aching from a long day's work. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning. One day they won't see me as a shadow anymore. I'll make them realize who truly holds the power." Ruby Harper, a janitor invisible to everyone around her, was quietly embarking on a journey that would test her courage and determination. But this was only the start. The scornful stares and prejudice she faced each day only fueled the fire within her. Could Ruby overcome the challenges ahead? Don't miss what's next as the story begins to uncover dark secrets and the unyielding resolve of Ruby Harper is put to the ultimate test. Share your thoughts below and stay tuned. Ruby Harper stepped through the glass doors of Granton Enterprises the following morning. The cold, sterile air of the building seemed to seep into her very skin. The gleaming lights, the click-clack of high heels on the polished marble floors, and the indifferent glances that slid past her, all of it reminded Ruby of her place, invisible, unimportant, and easily replaceable. But deep down, Ruby wasn't someone who could be so easily overshadowed. Her heart carried scars from the past, but it also held a fierce flame that lit the path she had chosen. She knew that to win, she had to play their game, but on her own terms. Ruby bent down to clean a stain on the tile floor in the lobby, while a group of office workers gathered nearby, chatting animatedly. Their laughter rang out, but there was no warmth in the sound as far as Ruby was concerned. "Look, the new one," a young man in a pinstripe suit said loud enough for Ruby to hear. "She looks pretty hardworking, but I bet she won't last a week." "Really? I didn't even notice they replaced someone. When was the last time I spoke to one of the cleaning staff?" "Oh, right, never." A blonde woman with immaculate makeup exclaimed, bursting into laughter. Ruby felt her ears burn. Their words pricked at her pride like sharp needles, but she didn't let herself lose composure. Instead, she scrubbed the floor faster, keeping her mind clear, reminding herself that their words were merely a reflection of their narrow worldview, not of her own worth. After lunch, Ruby was assigned to clean the large boardroom on the top floor, a place she always tried to avoid. As she pushed her cleaning cart down the gleaming hallway, loud laughter spilled out from the boardroom. "What do you think?" Nathan, a man's voice, echoed. "This deal is going to make us millions, but I suppose we'll need to cut costs somewhere." Nathan Sterling, CEO of Granton Enterprises, replied, his tone dripping with smugness. "Simple. Cut the janitorial and security departments. We don't need that many people cleaning. We need profits, not expenses for things that add no value." "Exactly," another voice chimed in. "By the way, have you noticed the new janitor? I saw her down in the lobby. Looks like the type who'd get fired the second she spills a bucket of water." Laughter erupted, loud and filled with disdain. Ruby froze in front of the glass doors, her grip tightening around the mop handle. Their words weren't just personal insults, they were emblematic of the unjust system she was living in. They didn't see her as a person, but merely as a tool to keep their polished world spotless. Ruby took a deep breath, steadying her emotions. She knew this wasn't the moment to respond. Their words would serve as fuel for her determination. One day, they would have to face her as an equal, not as someone invisible. That afternoon, Ruby returned to the janitorial break room to grab more supplies. She found Linda, an older woman who had worked there for years, sitting with a weary sigh as she massaged her aching hands. "Are you okay, Linda?" Ruby asked, her voice full of concern. Linda looked at Ruby, her eyes reflecting exhaustion. "Okay? You know what they told me this morning? The supervisor said I have to work overtime unpaid, and if I don't agree, there are plenty of others ready to replace me." Ruby's heart tightened. "But that's not fair. You've been here for so many years." Fair Linda let out a bitter laugh, her eyes clouded with sadness. "Ruby, to them we're just shadows. They only see the clean floors, not the people who had to kneel down to scrub them." Ruby didn't reply, but anger welled up inside her. People like Linda didn't deserve to be treated this way. She silently vowed that one day she would change the way this world worked, not through confrontation, but through strategy and precision. On her way out of the building that evening, Ruby ran into Malik, the young technician she knew. Malik smiled when he saw her, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "Are you okay, Ruby? You look a bit tired." Ruby gave a faint smile, unable to hide the sadness in her expression. "I'm fine. It's just, sometimes I feel like I don't exist." Malik nodded, his gaze filled with empathy. "I get that. Here, if you're not part of their circle, you'll never be valued. But you're not alone, Ruby. You're stronger than you think." Malik's words were like a glimmer of light in the darkness. Ruby felt a little lighter, but she knew she couldn't rely solely on others' sympathy. She had to act on her own. When Ruby returned to her small apartment, she opened her old, battered laptop and began her research. She combed through page after page of information about Granton Enterprises, meticulously taking notes. Each line on the screen brought her one step closer to her goal. Ruby made a silent promise to herself: "I will change this not just for me, but for everyone like Linda. One day they won't just see me as a shadow, but as a force to be reckoned with." The hidden secrets within Granton Enterprises were beginning to surface, and Ruby Harper was diving deeper into a dangerous game. The scorn and injustices she faced weren't just painful, they fueled her resolve to confront the unjust system. But did she have the courage to continue? Stay tuned as more secrets come to light and the stakes grow ever higher. Share your thoughts with us and follow along this gripping journey. Ruby Harper knew that to achieve her goal, she had to fully understand how Granton Enterprises operated, from the public policies to the hidden, darker corners of its system. As someone invisible in their eyes, she realized she could notice things no one else would pay attention to. Ruby began her workday with a burning determination. After her conversation with Linda and overhearing the mocking remarks from the upper floors, she resolved to uncover the weaknesses in the system run by Nathan Sterling and his team. While mopping the floor in a fifth-floor hallway, Ruby overheard a conversation between two mid-level managers near the CFO's office. "How's the benefits fund? Have you patched up that gap yet?" asked a short man wearing glasses, his voice hushed but urgent. "Don't talk about that here," the other replied, glancing around as if afraid someone might hear. Sterling said to push everything down to the lower departments. Nobody checks too closely down there. Those people probably don't even realize what's being cut. Ruby paused, crouching down to feign cleaning a spot on the floor, but her ears were sharply attuned to their words. She couldn't piece everything together yet, but it was clear something wasn't right. She made a mental note: benefits fund, a lead she needed to dig deeper into. That evening, Ruby waited until everyone had left before sneaking back to the CFO's office. She had noticed earlier that Malik, the EAT technician, often left his personal computer unattended on his desk. Knowing that Malik was the only person she could trust to help her access internal data, Ruby decided to take a risk. "Malik, I need your help," Ruby said when she found him in the IT room, where he often stayed late. "With what?" "You look serious," Malik replied, his curious eyes locking onto hers. Ruby took a deep breath. "I need access to some internal company files, but I need you to make sure no one finds out I'm doing it." Malik stared at her for a moment, then sighed deeply. "Ruby, what are you trying to do? If they find out I helped you, we'll both get fired." "Do you trust me, Malik?" I'm not doing this for myself. There are things happening here that they don't want anyone to know. I need evidence." Malik was silent for a long moment before finally nodding. "All right. But you have to promise me you'll be careful. We can't leave any traces." With Malik's help, Ruby gained access to a range of internal company documents. In an encrypted file, she found a detailed report on the benefits fund she had overheard mentioned earlier. The report revealed that Granton Enterprises had siphoned millions of dollars from the employee benefits fund over the past few years, redirecting the money into private investment accounts for the executive team. Ruby felt her blood boil as she read the damning lines. People like Linda, who worked tirelessly, were being exploited so that Nathan Sterling and others could live lavishly. She uncovered something even more shocking: a proposed new policy Nathan was preparing to implement that would eliminate healthcare benefits entirely for the lowest-level workers. If the policy passed, hundreds of employees would lose even the most basic protections. The next day, as Ruby continued her work, she noticed a change in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, and a few executives began casting glances her way. While mopping the floor on the top floor, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning around, she found herself face to face with a young woman with piercing eyes, Nathan Sterling's personal assistant, Claire. "You're the new one, right?" Claire asked, her tone devoid of friendliness. Ruby nodded, keeping her expression calm. "Yes, I started last week." "Strange. I've seen you in places that aren't part of your assigned work area. Don't make me remind you again." "Understood," Claire said, her eyes narrowing in suspicion before she turned and walked away. Ruby took a deep breath, feeling cold sweat run down her back. Claire clearly suspected something. Ruby knew she would have to be much more cautious moving forward. That evening, when Ruby met Malik again, she shared what she had discovered in the files. "Malik, they're not just stealing from the employees, they're about to completely strip them of their health care benefits," Ruby said, her voice shaking with anger. "We can't let this happen." Malik frowned, clearly shocked as well. "But what are you planning to do with this information? If you go public, they'll immediately know who leaked it, and I'll be the first one they blame." "I promise I'll protect you, Malik. But if we don't do anything, people like Linda will be completely ruined. I can't just stand by." Malik sighed, but eventually nodded. "All right, Ruby, but be careful. Don't let them catch you." Ruby sat alone in the janitor's break room, staring out at the darkened window. Inside her was a swirling mix of fear and determination. She knew that the next steps would be fraught with danger, but she also knew there was no turning back. "To change this, I have to see it through to the end," Ruby whispered to herself. "I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for everyone forgotten in the shadows." Ruby had taken a significant step forward, uncovering damning secrets about Granton Enterprises. But in doing so, she had also placed herself directly in the crosshairs of those willing to do anything to maintain their power. Would the truth be strong enough to withstand the counterattacks to come? Stay tuned for the gripping developments ahead, where Ruby faces the greatest dangers yet in her pursuit of justice. Share your thoughts below and continue to follow her journey. Ruby Harper stepped into the Granton Enterprises building on a dreary morning, her mind weighed down by the revelations she had uncovered. The shady dealings surrounding the benefits fund and the company's upcoming policies filled her with anger, but she knew she needed to remain calm. This battle couldn't be fought on emotions alone. It required strategy and careful planning. As Ruby pushed her cleaning cart down the fifth-floor hallway, she felt a pair of eyes following her. Glancing around, she spotted Claire, Nathan Sterling's assistant, standing not far away. Claire had her arms crossed, her sharp gaze cutting through Ruby like a blade. "You seem very diligent," Claire said evenly, her tone dripping with subtle insinuation. Ruby paused and nodded. "I'm just doing my job." Really? Claire stepped closer, her eyes fixed on Ruby. "I've heard someone's been wandering into unauthorized areas. You're not planning to do anything. Foolish, are you?" Ruby's heart pounded, but she kept her expression steady. "I'm only cleaning the areas I've been assigned to, Ma. I am. If there's been any mistake, I apologize." Claire raised an eyebrow, scrutinizing Ruby for a few seconds before turning to leave. Good. Don't make me remind you again. Ruby exhaled deeply as Claire walked away. It was clear that Claire's presence wasn't coincidental. She suspected something and was probing for answers. Ruby knew she had to be more cautious. Every misstep could bring her entire plan crashing down. That evening, Ruby decided to take another risk. With Malik's help, she accessed the company's internal email system. A string of emails between Nathan Sterling and James Heller, the CFO, caught her attention immediately. James, expedite the cuts to the benefits fund. We need to finalize this before the end of the month to free up the budget for the merger. One email from Nathan read. James replied, it's done, but we need to keep this under wraps. If employees find out, there'll be trouble. Ruby felt a surge of rage. Not only were they slashing the benefits fund, they were using the money to finance a massive corporate merger. She found an attached report detailing the figures, offering clear evidence of the misconduct. It was exactly what she needed. However, as Ruby was downloading the files, a notification popped up on the screen. Unusual access detected. Monitoring in progress. She quickly shut down the computer and left the break room. Her heart raced. Have we been discovered? The next morning, the atmosphere at Granton Enterprises felt tenser than usual. While Ruby was mopping the floor on the top floor, she heard footsteps stop behind her. MS. Harper. Nathan Sterling's authoritative voice cut through the air. Ruby looked up to see him standing there with Claire and 2 security personnel. Is there a problem, sir? Ruby asked, trying to keep her voice calm. We've received information about some unusual activity involving our internal systems. Do you know anything about this? Nathan asked, his sharp gaze fixed on her. Ruby swallowed hard but kept her expression neutral. I'm just a janitor, sir. I don't know anything about the company's systems. Claire stepped forward, her eyes locked onto Ruby's. Interesting, because we detected an access attempt from the janitorial break room last night. You're certain you don't know anything? Ruby felt a cold sweat running down her back, but she knew she couldn't show any weakness. The break room is used by multiple people. If someone did something wrong, I have no involvement. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then waved a dismissive hand. Fine, but I'll be keeping an eye on you, Ruby Harper. Ruby bowed her head and resumed her work. As they walked away, she felt like she had narrowly escaped a dangerous trap. But she also knew time was running out. If she didn't act quickly, they would soon uncover the truth. That night, Ruby met with Malik again. We've been found out, she said, her voice tense. They're suspicious of me, but I don't think they have evidence yet. Malik looked worried. Ruby, maybe we should stop. If they figure out who you really are, this could end very badly. No, Ruby replied, her eyes burning with determination. I can't stop. They're stealing everything from people like Linda. I have to do this. What Ruby didn't know was that Malik, gripped by fear, had secretly reported her actions to Claire. He didn't want to betray her, but the pressure from his superiors and the fear of losing his job left him with no other choice. 2 days later, while Ruby was working on the top floor, she was suddenly summoned to Nathan's office. Inside the large glass-walled room, Nathan, Claire, and James were seated, waiting for her. On the desk lay a stack of documents, the very ones Ruby had downloaded. Ruby Harper. Nathan began coldly. What do you think you're doing? Ruby glanced at the documents and realized everything had been exposed. But instead of fear, she straightened her posture, her gaze unwavering and defiant. I'm doing what none of you would ever dare to do, she replied firmly. I'm standing up for the people you exploit. Nathan chuckled dismissively. And who do you think you are? A janitor challenging an entire corporation. You can't win. Ruby stepped forward, her eyes blazing. No, I'm not just a janitor, and you'll soon find that out. The room fell into stunned silence. Ruby knew this was just the beginning of a true battle, and she was ready to face it head-on. As Ruby stepped out of the office, her heart was a mixture of anxiety and resolve. She had been exposed, but she knew there was no turning back. The moment for change was near, and she was prepared to face whatever it took to bring the truth to light. Ruby Harper left Nathan Sterling's office with slow, measured steps, but her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Nathan's taunting words echoed in her head. "Who do you think you are?" Instead of discouraging her, those words only stoked the fire within her. "They'll find out who I am soon enough," Ruby told herself. However, she also understood that from this moment on, all eyes of suspicion would be on her. Nathan and his team wouldn't stay idle. Ruby needed to act quickly and take the next step before they could counterattack. As Ruby entered the janitor's break room, she found Linda sitting there with a cup of coffee in her hands. Linda looked up at Ruby, her face etched with concern. "You don't look well," Linda said softly. "Is something wrong?" Ruby sat down beside Linda and sighed. For a brief moment she felt the urge to confide in her. Linda was someone Ruby trusted, but she also knew that the fewer people who knew about her plans, the safer they would be. "It's nothing," Ruby replied, trying to maintain a calm facade. "Just work stress." Linda reached out and took Ruby's hand, her eyes gentle yet deeply understanding. "I've worked here for a long time, Ruby. I can tell when someone is carrying a heavy burden. If you need someone to listen, I'm always here." Ruby smiled gratefully but chose not to say more. Linda might be an ally, but Ruby didn't want to put her in harm's way. That night, Ruby and Malik met at a small cafe where they could speak more freely. Malik, after confessing that Claire had pressured him into monitoring Ruby, was filled with guilt but ultimately decided to side with her. "Ruby, you have to know they're working to take you down," Malik said, his voice tinged with worry. "Claire has suspected you for a long time. And now, after they found those files, things are about to get a lot more dangerous." Ruby nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "I know. But Malik, we have what we need. These documents are undeniable evidence of their corruption and exploitation. I have to get this information out to the public." Malik frowned. "But how? If you go public, they'll know it's you. You could be sued. Or worse." Ruby was silent for a moment before replying, "I have a plan. But first, I need access to the larger archive system. They're not just embezzling the benefits fund. I'm sure there are other violations we haven't uncovered yet." Malik sighed heavily. "All right, but you need to be careful. From now on, every move you make will be watched." The next day, Ruby returned to work, trying to keep everything as normal as possible. But she quickly realized that the atmosphere around her had shifted. The stares from her colleagues, the whispered conversations behind her back, all made her feel increasingly isolated. During her lunch break, while mopping the fifth-floor hallway, Claire appeared out of nowhere. Her high heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing with a chilling sharpness. "MS." "Harper," Claire said, her smile laced with hidden malice. "How long have you been working here?" Ruby looked up, responding calmly. "Just a few weeks, I am." Claire smirked. "Interesting. I've noticed you seem curious. That's not a very good trait to have in this company. Some people should learn to stay in their place." Ruby kept her composure, though inside she felt a stab of anger. Claire was playing mind games, but Ruby knew she couldn't show any sign of weakness. "I understand. I'm just doing my job. Nothing more," Ruby replied, then bent down to continue mopping the floor. Claire stood there for a moment, her gaze probing, before finally turning on her heels and walking away. But Ruby knew this wouldn't be the end of it. That evening, Ruby received a message from Malik. "Claire is digging through computer access logs. You need to act now." Ruby knew time was running out. If Claire uncovered all of her and Malik's activities, it would be over. Ruby decided to take one final risk. Returning to the office at midnight, she used the account Malik had created for her to break into the main archive system. While searching, Ruby uncovered a shocking document, not only evidence of embezzlement from the benefits fund, but also proof that Nathan Sterling and his team had used company assets to bribe government officials and cover up labor lawsuits. The document also referenced a significant amount of money transferred overseas, potentially a clear indication of money laundering. As Ruby was downloading the files, the office lights suddenly flicked on. She turned around to see Nathan Sterling standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression cold and unyielding. "What do you think you're doing, Ruby Harper?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. Ruby swallowed hard but stood her ground. "I'm doing what everyone should, bringing the truth to light." Nathan stepped closer, his gaze cutting like a blade. "You don't realize the fire you're playing with. Do you honestly think a janitor can take me down?" Ruby lifted her chin, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I'm not just a janitor. And you'll find that out soon enough." Ruby was escorted out of the office, but in her possession was enough evidence to dismantle an entire corrupt empire. The real battle had just begun, and Ruby knew that from now on, the stakes would be higher and the threats even greater. Ruby Harper had come so far, but the cost was rising. Nathan Sterling began to launch even more dangerous counterattacks, and the web of danger tightened around her. How would Ruby overcome this next trial? Stay tuned for the next chapter to witness Ruby's courage as she confronts a powerful enemy. Share your thoughts below and don't miss the gripping developments ahead. Ruby Harper was escorted out of Grant & Enterprises under the suspicious gazes of a few night shift employees. Claire stood beside Nathan Sterling, her expression triumphant. But even as she was led away, Ruby maintained a calm demeanor, her gaze unwavering and devoid of fear. She had prepared for this moment long ago. The moment she returned to her apartment, Ruby opened her laptop and reviewed the data she had managed to download before being caught. The files confirmed that Nathan Sterling and the leadership of Grant & Enterprises had not only embezzled money from the benefits fund, but also used illicit funds to bribe officials and cover up lawsuits. A slew of emails and financial transaction documents provided undeniable evidence of money laundering. Ruby knew these were the final pieces she needed for her plan. But she also understood that from now on, her life would no longer be peaceful. Nathan would not let this go without a fight. The next morning, Ruby received a call from Linda. Her voice trembled with fear. "Ruby, they're investigating all the janitorial staff. They've started asking questions about you, and even about me. Claire came to see me this morning and said I'd lose my job if I didn't give them something on you." Ruby clenched her phone tightly, guilt flooding her. "I'm sorry, Linda. I never wanted to drag you into this." Linda sighed. "Ruby, I trust you, but you have to be careful. They're not going to stop here." Ruby nodded, feeling the weight of the danger closing in on her. But instead of retreating, she decided to use the documents in her possession to escalate the situation to its peak. Ruby reached out to a journalist named Zoe Carter, renowned for her investigative pieces exposing corporate corruption. Ruby had read Zoe's articles about high-profile lawsuits in the financial industry and knew this was the person who could help her. "Ruby Harper," Zoe said over the phone, her tone skeptical. "You're claiming to have evidence of corruption at Grant & Enterprises." "Not just corruption," Ruby replied firmly. "I have proof of employee benefit cuts, money laundering, and bribery of officials. I need your help to bring the truth to light." Zoe was silent for a few moments. "Meet me at the cafe on Main Street. Come alone. And bring the documents." Ruby arrived at the cafe, carrying a hard drive containing all the critical documents. When she walked in, Zoe Carter was seated in a corner, holding a cup of coffee, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "You're Ruby?" Zoe asked as Ruby sat down. Ruby nodded and slid the hard drive across the table. "Everything is here. But you need to understand I'm risking everything to do this." Zoe opened her laptop and quickly reviewed the files. After a few minutes, her eyes widened in shock. "My God, what you have here could bring down an entire empire." Ruby met Zoe's gaze, her expression resolute. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for people like Linda, those who are exploited and have no one to speak for them." Zoe nodded and closed her laptop. "I'll take this on. But you need to know, they won't sit idly by. Nathan Sterling is not someone who goes down without a fight." Meanwhile, at Grant & Enterprises, Nathan Sterling was holding an emergency meeting with his legal and communications team. Claire entered the room, carrying a file. "Ruby Harper has met with a journalist," Claire said coldly. We need to act before this gets out." Nathan glared at Claire. "Find a way to stop her. Whatever it takes." Claire nodded, her eyes cold and calculating. "I have a few ideas." That evening, Ruby received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, Claire's mocking voice came through. "Ruby, what do you think you're doing? Do you really believe you can win?" Ruby took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I don't believe. I know. And I won't stop." Claire let out a dry laugh. "Then be careful. People like you don't usually have happy endings in this game." Ruby hung up, her back cold with sweat. But she also knew she couldn't let them intimidate her. She had come too far to turn back now. The next morning, Zoe Carter called Ruby. "Ruby, I've gone through all the documents. This is a massive story, but I need more time to verify everything. We have to do this the right way." "How long?" Ruby asked, her voice urgent. "A week at most. But you need to be ready. When this story breaks, you'll be a target." Ruby was silent for a moment, but she knew deep down that she had been ready for this for a long time. "I'll wait." Ruby stared out of her apartment window, her eyes fixed on the Granton Enterprises building. She knew the battle had reached its critical stage. In 1 week, the truth would be revealed. But before that, she had to brace herself for everything Nathan Sterling and his team would throw at her. The fight was just beginning. Ruby Harper knew she couldn't sit idly by for a week, waiting for the storm to break. Once Zoe Carter's article was published, everything would change, but until then, she had to prepare for Nathan Sterling's counterattacks. Ruby had no doubt he wouldn't let her operate freely without striking back. The next day, Ruby received a call from Linda, her voice filled with worry. "Ruby, something's happening," Linda said. "They're forcing all the janitorial staff to sign confidentiality agreements. They said if we don't sign, we'll lose our jobs." Ruby gripped her phone tightly. This was a classic tactic of large corporations using the fear of unemployment to silence employees. "Don't sign anything," Linda Ruby said firmly. "They can't force you to do this." "But Ruby, if I don't sign, I'll have nothing," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. Ruby felt her heart sink, but she knew that if Linda signed, all the evidence and witnesses Ruby had been trying to protect would be wiped away. That night, Ruby received an anonymous text: "Come to the basement parking lot at 10 p.m. There's something you need to know." Ruby didn't know if it was a trap, but she felt she had no other choice. Armed with a recording device and a small knife for protection, she went down to the basement at exactly 10 p.m. The parking lot was dark and cold. A man stood in the shadows, wearing a hat that obscured his face. As Ruby approached, he spoke in a low voice. "I'm an accountant. I can't stand by and watch what they're doing anymore." The man handed Ruby an envelope. "Inside are documents of bank transactions they're trying to hide. This will give you more evidence to bring them down. But be careful, they're already starting to suspect me." Ruby thanked the man, but before she could ask more, he disappeared into the shadows. The next day, Ruby learned that Claire was intensifying her efforts to find any evidence against her. Malik sent her a warning message: "They're combing through every employee's accounts. They'll find out about you soon. You need to release the documents before it's too late." Ruby understood that time was running out. If Zoe's article wasn't published in time, Nathan could suppress everything before the truth came to light. She decided to take another risk. Ruby secretly sent a small portion of the new documents she had received to another group of journalists, ensuring her identity remained anonymous. She knew this was a gamble, but she needed to make sure that even if she was caught, the truth wouldn't disappear. When Nathan discovered that part of the documents had been leaked, he called an emergency meeting. Ruby, along with all the janitorial staff, was summoned as part of his efforts to assert control. "Ruby Harper," Nathan said, his voice cold as ice. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've crossed the line." Ruby held her head high. "What line, Mr. Sterling?" "The line you drew to cover up the truth." Nathan smirked. "You think one article can bring me down? You know nothing about power." Ruby stepped forward, meeting Nathan's gaze without flinching. "You know nothing about people like me. You think power is what you hold in your hands, but in reality it's the people you disregard who are the foundation of everything you have." Claire interjected, her eyes sharp and piercing. "You have nothing but empty words. Whatever documents you have will be neutralized." Ruby smiled, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. "This is a copy of everything I have. And I've already sent it to people who will expose the whole truth. Do you think I'm alone? I'm not fighting this battle by myself." Nathan fell silent, his face betraying a flash of anger. But before he could respond, his phone rang. It was a call from his legal team, informing him that journalists had begun releasing portions of the documents. By that afternoon, Granton Enterprises had become the center of media attention. Articles exposing corruption, embezzlement from the benefits fund, and money laundering flooded news outlets. Nathan and the leadership team faced unprecedented pressure from shareholders and government authorities. Ruby knew the fight wasn't over, but she had gained the upper hand. She had forced Granton Enterprises to pay for their wrongdoings, and this was only the beginning. Standing at a distance, Ruby gazed at the Granton Enterprises building, the glow of news tickers reflecting in her eyes. A faint smile crossed her face as she thought to herself, "Your power games are ending, and I'm the one changing the rules." But she also knew that Nathan wouldn't stay idle. The next battle promised to be even fiercer, but this time, Ruby was ready. Rumors of Granton Enterprises' misconduct spread like wildfire. The media exposed the documents Ruby had provided, offering undeniable evidence of corruption, money laundering, and exploitative employee policies. Ruby Harper became a mysterious figure in the public's eye, a brave individual who dared to challenge a powerful corporation. But as light was shed on Granton Enterprises' wrongdoings, a new shadow began to take shape. Nathan Sterling had no intention of surrendering. He launched a counterattack to protect his power, and Ruby knew she was about to face real danger. Ruby received an anonymous message from a co-worker on the janitorial team. "They're investigating all employees. Claire wants to pin everything on you." Ruby wasn't surprised. Nathan and Claire would do whatever it took to protect themselves, even if it meant making her the scapegoat. She immediately reached out to Malik. "Malik, they're trying to frame me," Ruby said over the phone, her voice tense. "We need to protect what we've got left. I need your help." Malik was silent for a moment. "Ruby, I'll always help you, but you need to be careful. Nathan won't stop until he finds a way to bring you down." Nathan appeared on television, holding a press conference to counter the allegations. In a room filled with flashing lights and cameras, he appeared calm, but his words dripped with subtle mockery. "These accusations are not only baseless but also an orchestrated attempt to tarnish the reputation of Granton Enterprises," Nathan said confidently. "We stand by our values of honesty and transparency. These documents have been distorted, and we will investigate to find the individual behind this." Ruby watched the press conference on her phone, feeling a surge of anger. Nathan was trying to twist the truth, but Ruby knew she couldn't let him regain control of the narrative. As Ruby pondered her next move, Zoe Carter called her. Zoe's voice was urgent but resolute. "Ruby, my article has caused a stir, but Nathan is trying to spin everything around. I need more witnesses, people who can testify that what we've revealed is true." Ruby thought for a moment. Linda can testify. She's worked at Granton for over 20 years and knows the injustices here better than anyone." "Then convince her," Zoe replied. "But Ruby, you need to know that if Linda agrees, she'll become a target too." Ruby nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. It wouldn't be easy, but she believed Linda was strong enough to take a stand. Ruby met Linda at her small apartment. Linda sat in an old armchair, clutching a cup of tea, her face lined with worry. "Ruby, I don't know," Linda began, her voice trembling. "If I testify, they won't just fire me. They could make sure I never find another job again." Ruby sat beside her, taking Linda's hand in hers. "I understand, Linda, but if we do nothing, they'll keep exploiting others, people like you, like me. This is our chance to change things." Linda was silent for a long moment, then finally let out a sigh. "I trust you, Ruby. I'll testify." Ruby felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but she also knew that this decision would put Linda in harm's way. Soon after Linda agreed to testify, Ruby received a strange email. It contained a video clip showing Linda accepting cash from an unknown man. The video had been carefully edited to make it look like she was taking a bribe. Ruby immediately called Zoe. "They're trying to smear our witness. We have to act before they release this video to the public."
Zoe was silent for a moment. "We need to prove the video is fake. I'll find a video analysis expert, but Ruby, you have to keep Linda safe." That night, when Ruby returned home, she found her apartment door had been forced open. Her papers and equipment were scattered everywhere. Ruby quickly checked her belongings, but the hard drive containing the crucial documents was gone. Ruby called Malik. "Malik, they broke into my apartment. My hard drive is gone." "Don't worry," Malik said calmly. "I backed up all the data. We haven't lost anything." Ruby breathed a sigh of relief. But she knew this was just the beginning. Nathan was growing desperate and would do anything to protect himself. The next day, Zoe contacted Ruby with good news. They had proven the video of Linda was fabricated. However, Granton Enterprises didn't back down. They launched a media campaign smearing Ruby, labeling her as an anonymous disruptor and threatening to sue her. Instead of being intimidated, Ruby organized a press conference alongside Zoe and Linda. At the event, Linda publicly shared her story, revealing what she had witnessed during her 2 decades at Granton. "Granton Enterprises has exploited us, the workers, at the lowest levels for years. I can't stay silent any longer," Linda said, her voice trembling but resolute. Linda's testimony, combined with the documents Ruby had provided, ignited a public outcry. Nathan and his team were forced entirely onto the defensive. Standing just outside the flashes of the reporters' cameras, Ruby felt a flicker of hope spark within her. The battle was nearing its climax, but she knew Nathan would not go down without a fight. The wave of resistance was building, and Ruby was ready to face whatever came next to fulfill her mission. As allies emerged to support her, Ruby found herself on the brink of victory. But Nathan Sterling still held considerable power and was prepared to go to any lengths to defend it. Would Ruby have the strength to overcome it all? What will happen next as the fight between justice and corruption reaches its dramatic conclusion? Don't forget to leave your thoughts and stay tuned for the story's final moments. Nathan Sterling and his team were on the defensive, but Ruby Harper knew that Granton Enterprises wouldn't fall so easily. While the public and media zeroed in on the corporation's wrongdoings, Nathan assembled a powerful legal team and began launching direct attacks against Ruby and her allies. One morning, as Ruby prepared for a meeting with Zoe Carter, she received a call from an unknown number. "Ruby Harper," a deep male voice said. "You've caused enough trouble. This is your final warning. If you don't back off, we'll make sure you have no future." Ruby bit her lip, anger boiling within her. "If you could take me down, you'd have done it already." "I'm not afraid of you." She hung up, but unease settled over her. Nathan had entered his most dangerous phase when he would stop at nothing to protect his power. Meanwhile, some employees within Granton Enterprises began to revolt. They secretly sent information to Ruby and Zoe, exposing internal documents and emails detailing exploitative policies and how the leadership had funneled money from the benefits fund into their personal wealth. One of them was Kelly, a young accountant. She arranged to meet Ruby at a quiet cafe. "Ruby, I can't stay silent anymore," Kelly said, her eyes brimming with tears. "They forced me to falsify financial reports. If I didn't, I'd lose my job." Ruby took Kelly's hand, her gaze filled with empathy. "You did the right thing coming to me, but you need to be careful. If they find out, they won't leave you alone." Kelly nodded, but Ruby knew the young woman was facing grave danger. Nathan Sterling held another press conference, this time flanked by a team of lawyers and professional PR representatives. He declared that all allegations were part of a conspiracy to tarnish the reputation of Granton Enterprises. "Granton Enterprises has been and always will be a transparent and fair corporation," Nathan said, his tone calm yet cutting. "We will not tolerate those who attempt to smear our reputation." Ruby watched the press conference on a screen, her heart burning with indignation. Nathan was trying to turn the tide, but she knew the documents she and Zoe had gathered were enough to prove the truth. As pressure from the media and shareholders mounted, A public hearing was called to investigate the allegations against Granton Enterprises. Ruby, Zoe, Linda, and Kelly were summoned to testify. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers. Nathan Sterling sat at the opposing table, his face cold but betraying an undercurrent of unease. Ruby took the witness stand, her gaze steady and confident. "I worked at Granton Enterprises as a janitor. During my time there, I witnessed and gathered evidence of corruption, exploitation, and money laundering by the leadership." Nathan and his legal team tried to discredit Ruby's testimony, but when Linda and Kelly stepped up to testify, the truth became undeniable. The documents published by Zoe created a massive shockwave, leaving Granton Enterprises leadership with no defense. In an unexpected turn of events, James Heller, Granton's CFO, decided to turn on Nathan. During a tense interrogation, James confessed that he had followed Nathan's orders to slash the benefits fund and cover up illegal financial transactions. Nathan Sterling orchestrated everything. "I was just following his orders," James admitted, his voice trembling. Nathan's face went pale. The betrayal from his right-hand man was a devastating blow. From that moment, Nathan began to lose control. As the evidence piled up and witness testimonies exposed the full extent of the corruption, Nathan was left with no way out. The board of directors at Granton Enterprises made the decision to terminate him on the spot during the hearing and pledged to cooperate fully with authorities for further investigation. Granton Enterprises has been and always will be a transparent and fair corporation, Nathan said, his tone calm yet cutting. "We will not tolerate those who attempt to smear our reputation." Ruby watched the press conference on a screen, her heart burning with indignation. Nathan was trying to turn the tide, but she knew the documents she and Zoe had gathered were enough to prove the truth. As pressure from the media and shareholders mounted, a public hearing was called to investigate the allegations against Granton Enterprises. Ruby, Zoe, Linda, and Kelly were summoned to testify. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers. Nathan Sterling sat at the opposing table, his face cold but betraying an undercurrent of unease. Ruby took the witness stand, her gaze steady and confident. "I worked at Granton Enterprises as a janitor. During my time there, I witnessed and gathered evidence of corruption, exploitation, and money laundering by the leadership." Nathan and his legal team tried to discredit Ruby's testimony, but when Linda and Kelly stepped up to testify, the truth became undeniable. The documents published by Zoe created a massive shockwave, leaving Granton Enterprises leadership with no defense. In an unexpected turn of events, James Heller, Granton's CFO, decided to turn on Nathan. During a tense interrogation, James confessed that he had followed Nathan's orders to slash the benefits fund and cover up illegal financial transactions. Nathan Sterling orchestrated everything. "I was just following his orders," James admitted, his voice trembling. Nathan's face went pale. The betrayal from his right-hand man was a devastating blow. From that moment, Nathan began to lose control. As the evidence piled up and witness testimonies exposed the full extent of the corruption, Nathan was left with no way out. The board of directors at Granton Enterprises made the decision to terminate him on the spot during the hearing and pledged to cooperate fully with authorities for further investigation. Ruby stood quietly at the back of the courtroom, feeling a massive weight lift from her shoulders. She had accomplished what no one thought possible, bringing down a corrupt empire. However, victory had not come without its price. Linda lost her job for testifying, but Ruby helped her secure a new position at a nonprofit organization. Kelly, though initially terrified, continued her work as an accountant, now more confident than ever. Malik remained a loyal friend, and Zoe became one of the most celebrated journalists in the field. As for Ruby, she decided to leave Granton Enterprises. She knew that this battle had changed her forever. Standing outside the Granton Enterprises building, where she had once been an invisible janitor, Ruby now stood as the woman who had brought down an entire system. She took a deep breath, filled with pride but also deep contemplation about what lay ahead. "I did it. But this is just the beginning. There are so many other places that need change." Ruby walked away, ready to embark on a new journey, a journey of justice and hope. 2 months after the explosive hearing concluded, Granton Enterprises remained at the center of media attention. Authorities had officially launched investigations into Nathan Sterling and the executives involved in corrupt practices. Meanwhile, Ruby Harper, the woman who once silently walked the halls with a mop and bucket, had become a symbol of change. Ruby sat in her small apartment, the dim light from the window casting a soft glow on her calm face. She flipped through articles about the case, her heart filled with mixed emotions. Despite the victory, she couldn't forget the cost that others had paid. Linda had to leave the job she loved due to pressure, but she was now working at a nonprofit organization that supported struggling workers. Malik, her loyal friend, continued his work in it, but now he understood he could do more to fight injustice. And Ruby? She wondered if she was ready to move forward. But then, images of people like Linda, workers overlooked and undervalued in the shadows, flashed through her mind. That thought urged her not to stop. Under the leadership of a new board, Granton Enterprises announced major reforms. The benefits that had been slashed were reinstated, and a special fund was created to support low-level employees, a fund named after Ruby Harper. This marks a new beginning for Granton Enterprises, the interim CEO said during a televised speech. We are committed to building a transparent, fair company that puts its employees first. Ruby watched the speech on the small screen in her kitchen, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction but without any complacency. She knew that while the system had shifted, she had only just knocked on the first door. A week later, Ruby received an invitation to an awards ceremony honoring individuals who had made significant contributions to society. Reluctantly, she agreed, unaccustomed to being the center of attention. But as she entered the brightly lit hall, she was surprised to see Linda, Malik, Kelly, and even Zoe Carter waiting for her. Linda approached her, taking Ruby's hand. "Ruby, without you, none of this would have been possible. You didn't just change my life, you changed the lives of hundreds of others." Ruby smiled, feeling her eyes well up with tears. "I just did what needed to be done, Linda. Without you, Zoe, Malik, and Kelly, I couldn't have done anything." "No, Ruby," Zoe said, stepping forward with a determined look. "You inspired all of us. Your courage showed us that anyone can stand up to injustice." The ceremony ended with thunderous applause as Ruby Harper's name was announced. But Ruby didn't accept the award just for herself, she accepted it on behalf of everyone who had stood with her. After the event, Ruby returned to her small apartment. She unfolded a map and began marking the places she wanted to go. This time, Ruby wasn't seeking revenge or personal justice. She wanted to build a network to support forgotten workers. People like her and Linda who had been overlooked for too long. Zoe, now Ruby's close ally, volunteered to join her on the journey, helping to spread their story to the places where it needed to be heard. Ruby knew this mission wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. That evening, Ruby stepped out onto her balcony, looking at the city lights. The Granton Enterprises building, where she had once been dismissed and disregarded, now stood as a symbol of change. She took a deep breath, feeling more at peace than ever before. "This isn't the end," Ruby whispered to herself. "This is just the beginning." The glow of the streetlights illuminated her face, but this time, Ruby was no longer invisible. She was a woman armed with the power of truth, courage, and the determination to change the world. Ruby Harper, once an unnoticed janitor, had become a beacon of change. Her journey wasn't just a story of justice, but a reminder that anyone, no matter how small their position, could achieve greatness. Ruby's mission wasn't ending here, it was only beginning. This story concludes with a profound message about fairness and the power of resilience. Ruby Harper, a once overlooked janitor, bravely confronted injustice and created change not just for herself but for hundreds of others. Granton Enterprises, once riddled with corruption, now faced the challenge of rebuilding from the ground up on the principles of fairness and transparency. If this story resonated with you, hit follow and support the channel so we can continue bringing meaningful and heartfelt stories to you. Your support motivates us to spread these lessons of humanity to even more people. What do you think of Ruby Harper's journey and the transformation at Granton Enterprises? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the courage of one person is enough to spark change for the whole world. Thank you for being part of this story.